All right. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you all here. My name is Marco de Mutiis. I work as digital curator. Wait, they just told me how to handle it, and I'm doing it wrong. My name is Marco de Mutiis. I'm digital curator at Fotomuseum Winterthur. I'm also a lecturer at ECAL, at the Master Photography School in Lausanne. And I will be your host for an hour or so with these three wonderful human beings here. I'd like to thank, of course, the fair, Anna Planas and Nina Rörs especially for inviting me to organize this talk. I am very excited and I feel very honored to be accompanied by three fantastic artists today. Alina, Frieske, Gretchen, Andrew, Michael Mandiberg. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for being here with us today. So they will present some of their works and discuss ideas around the digital lure. So what is this digital lure that we have in this title? We are going to look at how digital, but also algorithmic and network transformations of the photographic medium, how they've been creating new forms of seductions. Seduction within contemporary visual cultures, and this seduction, of course, in ways, refer to ways in which they attract our gaze, they create desires, they shape also our way of seeing things and reality at large. We're also interested in seeing how artists are responding to these forms of imaging. We're going to look at practices that range from appropriating selfie culture to face filters, from also stock photography to generative AI. So we will see also how the tradition of photography is connected to contemporary forms of digital images that seduce and shape the viewers. We will see how different technologies are enmeshed in political and social networks, and how they influence representation and circulation, enforcing or resisting standards, bias, and norms. Finally, this is also a special topic for me because it forms the theme of the reopening show at Fotomuseum Winterthur. In fact, the exhibition title is The Lure of the Image, and it's very much inspired by the practices of the artists that we have invited here today. So the museum is at the moment under renovation until spring next year. So here you can see an image of the future museum, and in fact it's also a good example of a digital image, a photorealistic computer graphic CGI that lures the viewer and shapes reality in a different way that if I show the photograph of the present museum, right? So we can start with this digital image to start thinking about the lure of images and how they seduce us, and they also shape realities. As well as the temporalities, right? Like we often talk about the photograph as a document of the past, and now with CGIs, we are looking at the museum in the future. But if this is a good starting point, architectural renderings and CGI, in thinking of the properties and ubiquity of the lure of digital images, we can easily expand this to all sorts of images surrounding us on our screens. With my colleagues Doris Gasser, Alessandra Napo, and Gwen Fassler, among others who joined us at Fotomuseum, we started thinking about these images that lure us. An image of a cat that makes you go, oh. A TV show that you love to hate. People were talking to me about Emily in Paris briefly before. So a picture that baits your click, a thirst trap you can't resist, political propaganda embedded in cuteness, and the unfulfilled promises of perfect bodies on your dating app. And finally, one last Airbnb photograph that tricked you into a windowless trap, especially in Paris. So once again, just expanding a little bit some of these ideas, some of these like images that we're also gonna see in these practices that lure us, that makes us, that seduce our gazes. So we want to explore the seductive powers of photographic images online, and in our exhibition, we'll attempt to map the mechanisms of the lure and investigate how seduction and desire, but also affect and drive, are embedded in contemporary visual culture. So how do images entice or beguile us, or how do they control, bait, or deceive us? What digital and network logics underpin the persuasive attraction of images, and what new forms of seductions have they spawned? But enough about me and about our interest that we will explore in the exhibition, which I hope you will come to see in Winterthur, or if not, in the traveling next station of the show, which I'm not allowed to disclose yet. And I'd like to now hear it from our artist, and I'd like to invite specifically Alina Frieske to start with a presentation of her work. Thank you so much, Alina.
Thanks a lot, Marco, for the invitation. Also, Nina. I'm super glad to be here. My name is Alina Frieske. I'm working between the areas of photography, digital painting, and collage. I skip to the next. So in my work, I'm very much interested in the idea of how we present ourselves online. So I'm looking at the communication through selfies and the way we are affected, or the networked images affect us on a daily routine. So the way of how I'm working is that I'm interested in photographs that are pre-existing, that are already around us. And I work with mainly screenshots from the infinite flow of material that's been uploaded on social media to detect like tiny fragments, which I then recompose in a digital collage in several layers to form like new imagined sceneries. So the images that you see actually all begin with a drawing or a rough idea of how I want the composition to look like. And then these fragments are turning into brushstrokes or a color palette to add over several layers the final image. So it's also, for me, very important to think of the overview in this case, and the idea of, on the one hand, the single view that we have in this summary somehow, but also the multitude that's still consisting inside of all of these images. But at the same time, it's a lot about the tension of the things we would like to show and the things we would rather not show online. So in a way, you can also see that many of the figures are trying to hide themselves, or they even go away from being depicted in some way. As you can see in here, there are also a lot of fabrics and curtains where the composition is actually opposing what the original image was meant to be, because it's all based on material that was meant to be shared with others and uploaded to show one specific individual that turns into a collective again. Another part that's very important in the construction of my work is looking for similarities in a depiction. So you do see a lot of gestures and hands, and that's also related to the fact that there's a huge pattern or a lot of commonality in the ways that we, for example, hold our hand when we take a self-portrait, or like hold the hand on the phone, or we see the flash in the mirror when we take a selfie. So there are specific commonalities and patterns that I'm interested to look at and that I collect over time that turn into those images. At the same time, it can be a texture or a specific color that's been added. And speaking about the painting process, because it's very much, it takes time to create these images. So that's also something I'm interested in, of thinking of this fragment that's in a way fixated, and in doing so, it also gains more value again. And by looking at it over a longer period of time and also constructing it on several layers, it's like slowly developing into this view. And at the same time, I'm quite interested in thinking of the possibility to zoom into the image. So there's also the idea that it's fluid while I'm working on it, and there's always the possibility that it can grow out of the border of the frame, because that's the good part about it being digital. It can always go into all kind of direction, and I can imagine something that might happen next to it or above it. So you do see a lot of repetitions of the material itself, and there's also the interest to always look closer to what you can maybe find in the very details of the image as well. This is also the concept of my publication that came out in 2022, where it's very much about this repetition of the image and how it's been shown in many different ways. So there's this one motif that reappears over several pages in kind of different ways. So it's always recontextualized, and by this it like tells this narration about the way of portraiture nowadays in some way as well. And also I'm interested in seeing like the fragment itself as a puzzle piece somehow. So what is also specific for the book is that there's a index that's actually showing kind of the idea of the palette of how I'm working. So this really comes back to this giving the value to this tiny piece of information or this cutout that for me tells also a lot about, there's still a trace or there's still kind of narration that it has, and this is also why I'm still so interested in the texture and what kind of remains the photographic medium has. And then at the same time seeing the potential to abstract it again, and in doing it or putting it in several layers over and over, seeing what happens out of, like, well, how it can develop. And also like it's a very scientific enlisting in some way in here as well. So yeah, it's this long observation, which also relates to the thinking of the time aspect, like opposing maybe what the image was meant to be, because on social media we might see an image in a split of a second, or we scroll through content and then we kind of forget about it again, but it was really the interest to capture these and see what happens when they are developing over and over. And also I see the image as a traveling image. So in the process of constructing the work, it's very much about going from seeing something digitally on in social media and then working with the screenshot, but then taking it out of the screen and printing it on different materials, different sizes as well, and then test in the studio how I can put the composition together. Sometimes I do intervention with like foldings or like recompose it in the way of how the paper is placed together. And then it's rephotographed and brought back into the collage. So also in there, I'm kind of imitating the circulation of the photograph and seeing it over and over many times, and seeing it also in different variations. And what is also important in the work was this interest in the fragmented body or the fragmented person. So you do see also a lot of like blank spaces, which is actually something that brings me to the most current works that are partly also shown here in Paris Photo, where it's more about the idea of group behavior, or it's the first time where I was also interested in integrating a bigger group of people in a kind of entanglement and thinking of the connections we have to one another. So in here you see this, the work is called Stand-In. It's a stand-in series, and it's based on the idea, well, as the title assumes, it's the idea of replacement as well. And that's also why the figures actually lack a face. So it's like inspired by these like photo walls that we know where we kind of place ourselves behind and try to be in another role or be another person. And here it's really the idea to bring all of this together, and it's kind of in a narrowed space where the body parts partly don't really make sense and you don't really know which belongs to whom. And the concept for me to also think much more of a kind of choreography and see it more in a sculptural way, even of walking around this group of entanglement, and see it from different perspectives. And I still found it quite interesting to think about the fact that they are still based on self-portraits where like it's more about the individual posing something like maybe shopping bags they found before, or like presenting yourself in some way, but then still creating these connections we have to one another, and or dependencies we have to one another, maybe without knowing each other. This is also why you do not see the faces in the end. And the works themselves also have partly details where you see just the gestures themselves, or the hands like trying to grab or reveal something, grab for a hold in some way as well. And it's also about the like threads that kind of turn into the silhouettes of the bodies themselves. So I'm more and more working on this idea to merge all of those fragments and give them kind of another function in some way. And another aspect that's also partly shown here is the idea of masquerade or concealing, where I really brought the kind of the background to the foreground again, like using these stencils from aluminium, which also traces back to the idea of the contours of the original work. So it's like bringing it also back to the idea of the drawing or the contour itself. And what is also interesting is that when you pass through or you integrate with the work, you actually can feel the work in some way, or it kind of becomes more lively through the reflections we also create passing by. And this is the most, this was also made this year, the Newsfeed series. And this is the first time that I was actually working in a sequence of images. So you do see, which really appears a bit like an animation, where I wanted to work with this dissolution of the contours even more, where there are actually those 3 layers where you see a shoulder in the front, a hand holding a screen, and a face that's depicted within the screen. And through this series, I wanted to see how all of these different layers kind of dissolve into one another and kind of melt like a overheated device in some way. So this idea of the fluid images and the melting even becomes more and more important in my work. And as the title also says, pinch to zoom, it's also the idea to imitate this gesture of zooming into something and seeing more and more details. So yeah, I also invite you to have a look and see them in more detail, because it's also very different from seeing them on the screen to integrating with, or in seeing the fragments actually in real.
Thank you so much. Let's have a discussion at the end, and then I invite you, Gretchen, to please present your work.
Thank you. And Marco, thank you for having me up here with you, with these great artists, Alina and Michael, Nina, and Avantgarde Vossen. We are at booth F05. Please come see us all. Our booths are all very close to each other. That's Marco with a goat, apropos of literally nothing. Okay, so what I'm presenting here at Perry Photo and what I've been working on technically and conceptually for the last 2 years is a new series I call Facetune Portraits. I'm very intentionally using the term portraiture. I really want to place this work within the history and the drama of who gets painted, who's paying for it, who really has the power in that history. And so along with who's painting and who's paying, increasingly we have technology as a force of power within the image. So are you familiar with the term face tuning, face filters? Basically, these very common algorithms that are all over social media, but they are also all over the way people are getting plastic surgery now, actually coming in with these algorithmically modified images and asking for their faces to look like their digitally modified selves. One of my favorite as well is on Zoom, there's a feature called Touch Up My Appearance. So even this guy is in the middle of these questions that we're dealing with. So what I do with Facetune portraits, should I be aiming at something else? I see, okay. What I do with Facetune portraits is I take a photograph, and through a process I'm going to take you through briefly, I make the same changes that occur digitally and invisibly on our cell phones and make that process physical. This one you'll see over at the booth. There we go. So the process of making these involves creating a painting ground, followed by using an oil paint printer, which is a very cool and rare thing developed by Matter Labs in Tuxedo, New York, that can take any image and have it be reproduced in oil paint. This is something that a lot of digital artists use to be able to break into the physical market. They can just, basically print something into a painting. The reason why I love this printer is it gives me a physically manipulable photograph. When the photograph is still wet, I then apply a second process. Let's get through these. Where I give a second robot these, I take the image and I put it into the Facetune app. I put it into these same filters that when they occur digitally, don't leave a scar. And I run a diff algorithm where basically we just see what is different about the initial image that is not in the second one. And the robot, that's basically like an XY axis plotter, is given this set of instructions. And while the photograph is still wet and easily manipulated, it comes in and makes these modifications. Here, what you're specifically seeing is that while the robot is given instructions entirely from the algorithm, I'm not the one who says your nose needs to be straighter, your boobs need to be bigger. Like, that's TikTok, that's these algorithms. But what I can do is map out within those contours, still trying to make an image, still trying to make a painting. So this is, I believe, a video. Nope. Okay, here we go.
What you can cut as necessary.
Okay, so what I'm doing in this video here is working with my robotics team, and we're looking at starting off this robot in a way that as it comes through and into the image, I can still change things like pressure and speed and all of these other traditional aspects of mark making. So what happened here, this is a selfie. I've taken it with a Leica, so we don't have any algorithmic modification in the way the image was processed initially. And the robot has come in, and instead of moving a pixel invisibly to make my waist skinnier, it's come and just smudged the entire contour of my body. But in doing so, has created some quite beautiful brushwork. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay, it's 3 times. So normally this algorithm is moving these pixels, and instead we're dragging paint around, we're making a mess. What we really end up with is a set of scars, is a set of disagreements between who we are and who these AI-driven algorithms say we should be. So I think of these portraits as portraits of contrast, as portraits of conflict, and also as portraits that exists kind of messily with who we are. It's not just a value judgment on what are these algorithmic modifications doing to us and our expectations of people. They're portraits where we all have to coexist uncomfortably with our digital selves and how the algorithms think we are and who they think we should be. And these portraits really exemplify the uncomfortability and the mess and the tension of that. So I do hope you'll come and see them in person. I'm sure you'll all be going to the digital sector right after this, if you've not been with us already. And I'll let you introduce Michael, but I would be honored if I could.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for those two great, it's great to build on that structure that you both have laid out. I want to thank Marco and Nina for causing me to be here, and Adam from Tender as well. My name is Michael Mandiberg. I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I was trained as a photographer, and I go in and out of making image-based work as a component of a larger conceptually driven practice. I am going to talk about a project. I'm sorry, I wasn't going. Got it. Wasn't close enough. I am going to talk about a project called Taking Stock that I've been working on for the last 2 years. I finished the work that's in the booth on Sunday at 2:30 in the afternoon, so it's very, very fresh. And I want to note that there's a couple of videos I'm going to show you that have flashing images. I will call that out, so if you have difficulty looking at flashing images, please don't look. Over the last 2 years, I've scraped 130 million stock photographs. I think I have every image of an individual person. And from these, I've made a series of photographs and images. This one, the title is Topic 63, Pose 23, Gesture 21, Object 67, Pink Phone, Phone, Mobile, Communication, etc. And on some level, the rest of this presentation is about unpacking that title as a way of accessing process. This one is Topic 23, Pose 21, Gesture 68, Depress, Stress, Problem. This one is informally for David Horvitz, for any of you who get that reference. This is Topic 22, and here's a video. And this video has flashing images. One more? Nope, okay. Let's do.
Shocked and concerned, stunned young Asian woman gasping from shook, holding hands on mouth, popping eyes, scared.
Young handsome man holding coffee to take away covering, mouth with hand, shocked and afraid for mistake. Happy businessman standing isolated on white background.
Young Asian woman who were isolated.
Young Caucasian man isolated on white background.
The studio portrait of handsome cheerful worker with helmet and overall, isolated happy. A young pretty brunette woman in fashion suit and business.
This is a 9-minute video. It's just a section from it. Okay, stock photographs. Stock photographs are important anyway. They've been important for a long time. They surround us. We see them all the time. We pretend to not notice them. The art world and cultural theorists and photography theorists would like to pretend they don't exist. Very few people have considered them. They reek of commercialism and cliches. They're all studium, no punctum. No one will touch them. But the reality is that they are undergirding our visual iconography of the moment. Lion 5B is the database that is at the core of the models that are being trained for image generation. It's a 5 billion image data set that's scraped from the open internet, but actually a lot of it is stock photographs. In particular, a lot of the high quality images are stock photographs. OpenAI's DALL-E 2 is trained on Shutterstock. Adobe's tools are straight up stock photography. This is the top layer of the cake, the data cake that is that the algorithms are eating. That's a terrible mixed metaphor. I love mixed metaphors. And let's just come back to what those stock images are. Like, this is what I showed you the first round. And like, what's actually there? What's there is gender is a binary. The men all have beards. The women all have long hair. If you're at work, your hair should be up. Everyone is a professional. And they're all happy, with the exception of the rugged man in the bottom right, who is confident and stoic. And the majority of them are white. I've scraped, as I said, 130 million images. I have them from the obvious suspects like Shutterstock and Adobe, Getty Images, but also a lot, like every one I could find, including some very, very small ones, like Nappy, and I have some from from India, from Southeast Asia, Africa. But these, you can see that scale is pretty preponderantly to the larger ones, which are mostly European and North American. And the images are also European and North American, but the actual distribution is surprising. The bulk of these images come from the former Soviet Union countries. Ukraine and Russia have each made twice as many images in this data set as the United States. Belarus and Croatia have each made more images than Great Britain, France, and Germany combined. And I have theories about that, but we can talk about that later. So I did two analyses of this. One is I built a topic model, which is a way of using machine learning to describe the relationships between texts. So it's treating each set of keywords as its own set of text, and then finding the relationships between those. It throws out things like happy, smiling, because that's like every one of them is happy and smiling. Not every one of them. Some of them are depressed, and those ones do show up as a cluster. But they're basically statistically insignificant because they occur in even distribution across most of the images. You can see the largest one is just people described by their clothing. The second largest is business people. And the third, this one surprised me, it's people pointing. Usually at empty space where the advertisement's gonna come. And of course, like, in retrospect, it's like, oh yeah, of course, that's what stock photographs are, but then that's what AIs are learning we do. And that's when you start to see the fact that this is capitalist realism. If this is the Family of Man or August Sander, I love that August Sander is the front wall when you enter. Like, this is the version of that through capitalism's victorious lens. And so these thematic topics are one major analysis of the work. And the other is based off of figuring out where the faces and the hands and the body are. So I can actually place the images in the right way. So coming back to this image, it's topic 63, which is the phone mobile communication topic, pose 23, which is hands, both hands at heart center, and gesture 21, which is both hands in sort of this kind of gesture with the palm facing towards the person. This one also has it's filtered based off of whether or not object 67, which is a phone, is present, and it's only the pink ones. Okay, numbers. There's a lot of numbers. I don't want you to worry about the numbers and that you have to understand them in the abstract, but I want to get you to understand that this is the phone topic. On the left are the poses. There's 32 poses. Across the top, imagine this is actually spread out. Take it and go like that. Is 128 gestures. Down here, that one that's 3,726, that's the group of images where the hand is at heart center holding in a cradling position. And this is only for the images where the face is looking straight ahead and not rotated and not like that. So it's segmented, 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 segmented. And that is the latent image present at that place in the data. And you'll, oh, can I go backwards? How did I go backwards? This one, okay, got it. So just to see, highlighted in red are the places where there are clusters of images, and then there's the expanses where there are not. These are the possibilities of images in the data. There's about 6,500 images potentially in the data. And these are the possibilities that the AI can make. The AI knows where their images are. There's enough data to understand where a cluster is. This isn't exactly the same thing as a generative image algorithm, but it's looking at the same data and applying the same kind of principles. So you see what's there. I generally pick the largest cluster in the thematic data. This is the depressed one. This is finger gesture point. This is the fashion beautiful. This is another one of the phones. This is with the black phone. You'll notice that the pink phone, pink-red phone, is has long hair, is femme, and looks at the subject at the median, looks out at the camera, whereas the black phone is more gender ambiguous or more mask and looks at the phone, is doing work, is not to be looked at. And the businessman. This is shock, surprise, mouth. And then I think the next one is the video. So this is just closing out with another view of the same video.
A young blonde woman covering mouth with hands with
Young Hispanic woman, casual clothes, shocked, covering mouth. Young pretty woman, worried, upset.
a young pretty brunette woman in fashion suit at business building, posing.
So that's the work. It's downstairs as well. And I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael, Gretchen, Alina, thank you all. Where should we start? After this traumatic and hypnotic last video, maybe my question here at Parifoto is like, what happened to photography? It used to be easy. And when you mentioned August Sander, I was also thinking like, this is now like a data set. You know, when you go through that wall of those like 200 images, like, is this now like the way in which images and photographic images permanently exist or will be used for anyway? You showed us stock photography. You showed us both kind of a selfie culture somehow. All of these images that were also scraped from Flickr that created the databases and the data sets for many of these processes, right? Is the fair just another data set? Yeah, what has happened to photography is my question. Who wants to start?
I think that, I mean, something that I was really feeling in listening to you both present your work is, as you were saying in the beginning, these expectations. Like, how has photography influenced our expectations, and in what ways is that influencing the AI that is being generated and created? Where is that being educated from? So I think especially in how you were presenting this importance of what stock photography is, in the same way with face tuning, it changes our expectation of what the face looks like that is the sort of the foundation, not just of this whole fair being a data set, but like what we expect to see when we see other people. And then with you, the almost just a very artful way of not just showing that, but showing the emotional sort of underpinning of that is at least what I was feeling with you.
Yes, I also find it quite interesting just to think of the difficulty of like how to define it, and seeing all of these different ways of how we could read it in some way. I also realized there are many ways, also it's especially in my work, where it's creating this confusion in the beginning of not really knowing how it's made, or what it actually what it actually is. And this is in a way also speaking about this like overload and this not like this difficulty to really trace it back to like how it was made in some way, I think.
I don't think photography is exceptional. I think everything is becoming a data set. And that's the kind of computational paradigm that we're in. I think what's exceptional about photography is its historical claim on truth and how that gets put into a conflict with what happens when it becomes a data set.
Thank you. So maybe also following up on all of these replies, I noticed that, of course, you all deal with these multitudes of images, which really comments on, you know, the status of the photographic image now being, arriving in millions. And in order to make sense of this multitude, you have different strategies, and yet all three of you kind of arrive at a painterly look in some of the outputs that you showed. Have you thought about why, or is there a reason behind it? And what's your relation to it, and this between this kind of traditionally photographic image and painting?
I think Michael said it best. It has to do with the history of the relationship to truth and the role of the artist in making that selection. Like I was saying with portraiture, who's paying, who's painting, what is the technology, where is the power in this? And our literacy with painting is that we know it is not the truth, we know it is a truth. And I think the more we can get to that with photography, this understanding that it's always has been highly manipulable, is really maybe the only hope in this, is that with all of this confusion, there's a better understanding that it isn't truth.
Yeah, I think for me it's also a way of getting some rest in it as well, while dealing with this overload of images, like in the way of treating these fragments in the way of like looking for combination and looking for different patterns. It's also helping to see the familiar and the things we are used to in a new way and in a new context. So I think it's like kind of maybe also slowing down or finding a way to cope with the overload of material and information.
I think, actually, it's funny because I think about when I started doing this project, I was like, oh, this is a really photo project, because a lot of the ways that I work with photography, it's photography or it's in relationship to this other thing, or it's in a different context. But this, I was just like seeing all of the historical references. You know, I dropped the August Sander before, but like this is like spirit photography, and it goes back to another history also of composite images that has a very troubling history with Galton and things like that. I think that, so like there's histories in the history of the blur being, you know, and Julia Margaret Cameron, and like, you know, kind of like making the image blurry and artistic as a way of distinguishing it from the technicality of the image, like that history. But the other thing is that I think I'm trying to show what it looks like to see probabilistically, like what it looks like to see as data, to see as a set, as almost like as see the image as its quantum possibilities and it's one at the same time, because that ends up, that's what is happening when you're generating an image, is you're rolling the probability dice, and it's producing one instance of the quantum possibilities. So this kind of gets at that, and the end result is something, yeah, painterly, like in that it is strangely not like any photograph that has been seen. And I think it's partly because of the statistics and the way that the blur is different from a Gaussian blur. The blur is different from a radial blur. It's like a statistical blur.
I think also that instability of seeing, coming at it from more of a painterly background, I was thinking a lot about Frank Arbach and Giacometti's drawings and different forms of painting that do allow us to feel less sure about how something that is on a flat surface. Like we also dealing with 2D, trying to see and experience the reality of something while it is just dealing with the two dimensions that we have available in the way we're using this medium.
Thank you so much. I also really like this idea of a speculative, or this quantum photography. Like the photograph maybe has exhausted the way in which that can allow us to think through the image, and that's also an interesting way to see you moving towards, whether it's painterly or different ways to deal with the photographic. I was thinking also in relation of my experience in the fair. Full disclosure, of course, I'm a digital curator. I'm a big fan of the digital sector. But I did have this experience of moving through the fair, and it feels like the digital sector is also kind of more contemporary, alive, and slightly out of control, in a good way. But when I hear your presentation, I see your works. I feel you guys are almost like moralizing here. No, you're taking it down to our like, the digital is not fun anymore. It used to be fun, but we can't have fun with this stuff. It's creating biases, it's shaping our view, it's political. How do you deal with that? Are you moralizers? Asking all the right questions here. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I think for me it's like a twofold thing, because on the one hand, my initial interest in creating those images was always in like this worry about what material, like what kind of information is like around us, like that is like personal information that can be traced, and how we are seen online, and how like corporate platforms make use of our information, and how they are all exchanged without us knowing about it. And there was also this interest of like making these processes kind of like an attempt to make these processes visible, and this idea of how this portrait will look like that would be just based on all of the traces online. But at the same time, I'm working now for 4 years with this project, and it is also extremely motivating, and also for me inspiring to work with this material. And I think I also have like an obsession with these fragments right now, and these like stories they tell. So I think there's like really both sides to it. Also the fun part.
Do you guys ever touch grass? Do you have that feeling that you need to get off the screen?
I mean, my studio, it's painterly. It's a mess. There's Taylor Swift playing, and really, I think in something that's easier when you are looking at the works is the absurdity of all of this. Like my work definitely deals with the illogical end of all of this algorithmic modifications of the body, and I think you see quite a few people laughing at my stand, or at our stand.
I have come to see the work that I make as one way to understand, for me to understand the work that I make, is through the lens of data visualization. And that what I'm doing is I'm visualizing the image and making meaning from the image by creating feeling. So it's like creating an affective dimension to the data. And so in that sense, I'm less moralizing than transforming into something that allows you to experience something not in a purely cerebral and analytic mode. I am also working on something more like a paper with graphs, scatter plots, that helps actually dive into this data, because no one's actually looked at this data, because no one is foolish enough to spend 2 years collecting it. But yeah, I think it's about feeling, and the effect may feel moralizing in some sense, but I'm trying to give a felt sense of what is present.
Thank you. Of course, this was slightly a provocation, but it's also a question that I ask myself, and we ask in the context of the lure of the image. You know, when we look at this political and ethical aspect, I think we have to be careful also not to say, you know, to end up in this analysis that eventually everything is bad, or like you were just showing. I think that when we talk about the lure, there's a lot of spaces with affective dimension, or even like moments in which this, even some of the work that you create can create comfort, or moments in which that allow awareness. And that's actually something that also I notice in all of your work, like you also have some luring quality, you know? It seems like you want also to use similar strategies that are critiqued or used in the process of your work to attract the audience, hypnotize them, mesmerize them, keep them there. How do you think about this, or do you see that, or it's just me?
Yeah, I think on the one hand, there's probably, in my case, the confusion that is kind of attracting to go closer and to understand better what it is that it's depicted. But then it's also, especially in the more recent works, where I'm interested in this idea of the touch itself and working with the touch screen, and this idea to have a grip or have a hold of something. This is also why most of the sceneries are kind of melting away. So I think this idea of the fluid image as you kind of continuously see in all of the works, and that might be a method from my case to apply in all of these images.
There's also like a democratization of these tools that I think is celebrated in Facetune portraits. You used to have to be extremely powerful and have your Photoshop teams or a model in order to be changing your image in this way. One of the paintings, one of the photographs we have in our booth is of the UK royal family around when that scandal of their image manipulation came out. And it's specifically positioned in contrast to when Oliver Cromwell, when he became Lord Protectorate, he got his portrait done, and he said, "I want to be painted warts and all, show all of my blemishes." Because what he wanted to convey about himself was an honesty and a purity. And what I see in the way that our desire to modify ourselves to be more beautiful is not just trying to be pretty, it's trying to fit in. It's trying to be accepted by each other and very much by the algorithm. And that desire to belong is not something to be, put down or moralized about. These are the tools we all have right now, and we're trying to use them to get there.
I think that I'm going to answer just very, I don't have a grand answer, but yeah, it's like, it's meant to be hypnotizing. It's hard to look at it and it's hard to look away. And I think that tension is productive for the work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We still have 5 minutes, but I think it will be also a chance to open it up to people in the audience if they want to ask questions and enjoy the conversation. So basically, just maybe if you can raise your hand, we'll pass you a microphone and you have a chance to ask a question to either of these artists.
Hi, I'm Johanna. Just to bounce back on what you just said regarding the modify yourself to become pretty, to fit in. I was just listening, I cannot remember where, but there's an increasingly terrific number of people that feel lonely and that feel isolated, especially in the US among the young generation. So I wanted to know, like, how in your work and what you see, this sense of fitting in seems to be quite crucial. And despite all the digital world and the way we have that makes it easy to communicate, there's this really terrific increasing number of people feeling alone.
Yeah, you might be referring to the New Yorker just did a big article on teen suicide, and some of the quotes are directly related to images they saw online. I think Facetune is even directly mentioned. To me, all of that is, it's almost like the very negative side of this is the obvious side, and sort of what we do about it and how we convey it. How do we, without being too moralizing, say, like, this is what's happening. You go to the booth, everyone gets the same face, everyone gets the same boobs, everyone gets the same nose. And it does, like, it's a little funny when you see it in that context, but there's something that happens when the robot comes in to apply these modifications where it feels violent. It's like, it's carving our bodies apart and moving, using paint, using non-screens, using something that is material, is something that, like with this series in particular, I wanted to find a way to, I could be in conversation with people that young and who are not at, these photography fairs, and have them be curious about maybe how this is impacting them.
Hello. My name is Rosa. I'm a PhD candidate, so I really appreciated all your talk, specifically because I'm studying that. My question is a question for Alina, but it can be extended to all of you because it's really a curiosity. Because since I'm taking an interest in specifically the metamorphosis and the contemporary mutations of photography and digital photography and algorithms, one technology that is always around the corner, but somehow people never seem to be quoting, is virtual reality. And specifically, I was wondering, specifically to Alina, because you work with collage, and it reminded me of photogrammetry also in a way. Has 3D, the idea of going three-dimensional and developing environmental images or virtual reality, or kind of escaping the flat surface of the photograph, have ever crossed your mind in any way? Thank you. It was really interesting.
Yeah, thank you for your question. It is quite interesting because that's actually something I'm more and more thinking about to integrate in the work, but in a combination of like actually seeing it more physically. So there was also the first slide from the bigger panorama where you see parts of the images printed on aluminium in front of the work. So that was kind of the first step of really going out of the image in this way without using technology. But I think it could be also interesting to have an integration of that because, yeah, currently it's really the idea to have this sculptural work that could be walked around, and it's very inspiring for me, definitely.
Can we squeeze in one more question? I think there was one person here in the front.
How do you protect your images when they're all online and they're all displayed? Like up here, what do you do? And what about the stock photo agents? Do you pay them for those images? And is it just taken from the cloud, or is it actual? Do you pay the stock photo agent for those images? All borrowed.
Sounds that stock photography question was more directed at you, Michael, but
yeah, I can answer the stock photography question. It's considered transformative and fair use. So there's an exception to copyright law in the states where I made the work. Because it is transformative, it takes a very small part each component is a very small part of a larger work, and it comments on the original, and it does not impact the market for the original. Those are the 4 considerations to qualify for fair use.
It's perhaps also a needed approach in this moment in which images has become so ubiquitous and networked and online. I think the appropriation of images in all of these works also show very much how contemporary forms of photographic approaches require a switch from creation to appropriation, right? Do we need to upload yet another new image when we have like millions of stock photographs, a selfie in elevators or elsewhere? I think we have unfortunately reached, our time is up, but this was wonderful. I wish we could do it all day. So I'd like to thank you very much. Thank everybody who came. Thanks to the technical staff who helped us. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.